So it's a pleasure for me to now open the first discussion round, the first roundtable discussion with, at the moment, only Susan and me, Heide Schuster, in the podium, but I'm sure that Klaus will join immediately. Let me just take the opportunity before Klaus is joining us to announce the associates meeting. So I hope a lot of associates are in the stage now and listen to that. It will also be announced via email. So all the associates of PLEA are invited, please, to join the associates meeting on the third day, Thursday. At lunchtime, there is a separate room which you can access from the normal reception, the session summary. And you're invited to join us there, and we discuss with the associates of PLEA. So that's my first duty. And now Klaus joined us. It's not Joanna, it's Klaus. So let me just thank you both of you, Susan and Klaus, for two fantastic lectures, a lot of input, and yeah, I think we will have a lot to discuss now during that roundtable. So we had basically, I think, 4 key issues. First was the circularity, and on the other hand, the behavior presented by Susan. And then Klaus focused on the relation between microclimate, building envelope, building systems, and also reminded us that we are in a big world and that we face world issues and not only issues which are country specific or even city specific. We've seen a lot of different scales now, from urban to buildings, from building elements to people and their comfort, perception and behavior. And for me, there are a couple of key issues which I tried also to segregate from all the comments which have been written in the chat. So one first important point is the future climate design, which maybe can also be the first question to Susan and Klaus, as we have seen a lot of projects and a lot of interesting issues in both presentations. What do you think how we should approach the future climate, the climate change in our building design? Susan, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I suppose I saw a little bit of the comments myself, and I think a key point is, of course, that when we are simulating certain environments, when we're modeling these and evaluating them, that we are not only basing it upon the here and now and sort of historical data, but that we are looking at different scenarios. And I should say, in general, that idea of scenario planning, I think, is a really key part of future-proofing our designs, our built environment. And that's not only about climatic change, I would say, but also looking at demographic change, socioeconomic, you know, there's many aspects of this. So I think it's about remembering that, and again, taking this sort of broader spectrum approach so that it's not just always isolating one variable, but looking at how these interrelate and sort of relationships between those.
Thanks, Susan. Would you like to comment or add, Klaus?
Yeah, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yes.
I've had a bit of difficulties. So ringing good. Yeah, I guess the point is that, of course, in analytical terms, and this is typically what we would also do, you can play different climatic scenarios. But I think what's important to understand is that it's not just a case of applying different climatic scenarios, but completely questioning how we are future-proofing designs. Many designers that I've interfaced with, they think they've got to modify the whole design, whatever the project may be, to future climate change. And I believe that one can question that by understanding human mobility. Why not climate-proof parts of a building only, which is far more cost-effective, where people can migrate to during those extreme periods and function and work and live, and then in the other times migrate back to where they normally work and live. So that means reconsidering how spaces are designed, make them more generous, don't make them too small. Susan mentioned earlier about, I believe it was a school where there were no corridors. So the stairs become part of, could be teaching space. So this whole notion of multi-use and therefore adapting certain elements of a building for future climate change, testing these through different climatic scenarios is really, really important and valid. So my question is, why do the whole building? Why spend all that effort on a whole building? Yeah, because there are parts of every building that don't need to be future climate changed.
I think
just work out in most buildings what percentage corridors or circulation traditionally take place in a building. Why future-proof them? So the point I'm just trying to get to is there's always this dilemma where, oh, this project, the client hasn't got this money. You can do a lot with whatever budget. It just requires you to challenge the status quo, rethink, and be a little bit more self-critical and move away from conventions that exist today, including design criteria.
I think is it okay if I jump in again?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and your last point there in your presentation about a change of mindset, I think is really key to this and what you're talking about now, Klaus. I think about resilience theory, which is, of course, a key aspect or approach towards climate adaptation. One of the important notions in there is this concept of redundancy. And when to begin to say that we want to design in redundancy, meaning there has to be a certain bagginess, right? There has to be wiggle room for things to change and adapt. But we're an industry which is so focused on efficiency, make everything as lean and as tight as possible. So it does take that change in mindset to be able to champion and integrate ideas such as redundancy and sort of, take those on board.
Yeah, it's correct. I mean, the word I often like to attack is the word flexibility, and I like to replace it with adaptability, because in flexibility, as you use the word redundancy, you pay for a certain level of redundancy from day one, which who knows when you will use it. Adaptability means that the key core elements of your project, whether it's a building or a master plan, are designed and allow for future adaptation. Yeah, you mentioned about this modular construction, adapting, taking, changing away. These sort of things is about adaptability. But we do, unfortunately, have, we all know, we have to face the truth, the construction industry is one of the most conservative industries in the world. You look at automotive and aerodynamic industry and aircraft industry and both, they're miles ahead in materiality. And why is that? Yeah, it's because we like to do things the way they've been done. And nobody wants to be the pioneers. And I don't think this is about you know, many clients hate the word pilot project. Oh, my project shouldn't be a pilot project. It's not about pilot project. It's about existing technologies and reassembling them in a clever way and just thinking laterally and making the human the center of what this is about. You know, I like, you know, I often attack a phrase. I hear a lot about smart technology, smart cities. Nobody talks about smart humans as if we're the dumb ones. We're the most intelligent species in the whole equation. We're the ones that are creating the problem. We're the ones who are using the energy in the water. So the focus should be on us as humans. What can we do to improve environmental behavior and by consequence, environmental performance? And as per your lecture, Susan, you know, behavior can change architecture just like architecture impacts behavior. But understanding the power that we have at our hands is always easier to pin the problem on someone else or the client with the money. I think clients on one level, I understand frustration, but they're also a little bit victims of the process. We need to educate them as much as we educate our children and the enablers of it. So is not be afraid of taking a different path. Sorry, Heidi, I'm maybe rambling on.
I will interrupt. But I will actually take the expression of the human-centered design, or, well, taking the human being as the center of the whole thinking. We are in a very special situation nowadays, and with the pandemic. And there is a big discussion going on now worldwide about global health. So because we are in that situation, and because you tackled both many different aspects of planning issues, especially, let's have a short look on the aspect of planetary health. After that, I would like to go a little bit into the chat to take the questions out of the audience also. But this is a point which I think, especially for our first day here, we should talk about. So what does the pandemic teach us in terms of future development of our cities and buildings?
Okay, I mean, it's very topical, obviously, what the point you raise, and it is something that has been coming up a lot also recently on projects and competitions, how you deal with it. But again, I would like to come to an interesting, for me, I find it interesting response to that, is that before I come and directly respond, I just want to sidestep for a second on the subject. And that is to do with, again, human behavior. We all know that we have been given advice by various health authorities and bodies around the world how we should be behaving through social distancing, minimizing the spread of pandemic. And when people don't do it, you have the problem. You're back to your human. It is us as a species that needs to either take it seriously and how to deal with it or not, whether it's pandemic, whether it's environmental performance, whether it is living in a different manner to be more sustainable. So funnily enough, it comes back to the same issue. However, to your specific question, what is interesting is that passive design, in particular, what I call, like we did in Korea, blurring the boundaries between inside and outside, allowing, like Susan said, in the school, well, where is your teaching space? You could be here or you could be there. By breaking down these conventional barriers, physical walls should not be barriers, but spaces, they actually enable one to all of a sudden teach classrooms in different environments, bigger spaces. You can social distance, adapt much more. The amount of ventilation rates and air change rates in naturally ventilated building far exceed anything you can do in mechanical systems. So there's a lot of advantages. That doesn't mean, let's be clear, it doesn't mean mechanical systems or air conditioning is bad for dealing with pandemics. It isn't necessarily so, but it quickly gets classified as being a problem. Now, I'm coming back to the point it is about space planning in a way that enables us as designers and end users to change the use of these spaces. Today will be the COVID-19 pandemic. What is it going to be in 10 years? Right? It will be something else that's going to hit our way. So what I'm trying to say, I really believe in this, you know, the high-tech architects with Fosters and Rogers and Grimshaw, they all went in this loose fit, you know, rip the cores out of buildings, don't make everything compact, widen things, let it be loose. I think there's something there. They didn't do it for pandemic. They didn't do it for energy efficiency. They did it for adaptability, because things change far, far quicker over time than any one of us in this conference can tell. None of us can tell what's going to happen in 30 years exactly. But we can design for change, and that's what we've got to do, including the pandemic.
Okay, Susan.
Well, I would certainly reflect and agree with everything Klaus has just said there. I think something we've been talking a lot about is that the world, but in particular the design community, had such a big and fast response to COVID. And understandably, so much of that has been focused around recovering from COVID, you know, immediate responses to do with sanitation largely. And while, of course, that is absolutely necessary, we really want to look at this longer time perspective. You know, how can we begin to respond and build in resilience? I'll use that word again, and the adaptability Klaus was speaking about. And that we don't forget about the psychological, the social, the emotional needs that we have that are very important parts of well-being. It's a bit like we often use Maslow's, you know, his hierarchy of needs, this pyramid, and we kind of translate that into different built environment sectors. But the key thing is that at the very bottom of this, you've got the physiological aspects. Then you've got security, and these are the foundation of that pyramid. But we want to be sure that we continue on up that, so that we're also dealing with, you know, feeling a part of something bigger, connection to nature, a feeling of being able to influence your own environment and have agency and control. These are important, and we need to always be aiming to not only address the bottom levels of that pyramid, but to take a full height approach.
I would endorse that. And Heidi, just one point on that. I forgot the name of that research. It's the longest research ever undertaken. It's been running over 75 years. I don't know whether it's Harvard or who did it in the States.
Yeah.
I think it is Harvard. It's about, let's call it human happiness and life and this. And they've tracked people for over 75 years regularly. They do medical checkups on these people. And they try to understand what makes people live longer and happier. And let's face it, I think all of us would like to live longer and happy lives. I don't think there's nobody in this audience who disagrees with that. And the conclusion is, it is something also Susan mentioned, is about actually not money, but positive social interaction, whether it's family, friends, or people. And they have medically proven these people live happier and longer lives.
Yeah, it's a great reference.
Absolutely.
I think
so. We need to think about this, right? It is about that. At the end of the day, we got to keep a focus on. And then I think if you achieve that, of course, that doesn't mean, I beg your pardon, at the cost of consuming more energy or water generating waste. No, because it will impact us negatively. So understanding that.
There were a lot of comments and questions on the topic of the circular design, and also combined with that, the aspect of life cycle approach. A big problem, at least of my opinion, but I think most of us think like that, is the missing approach to the whole life cycle of the building, which we try to implement into the building design, but the understanding with of investors and cities and so on, to really engage people doing these studies. is not very big. So there were a lot of questions, and one of the questions was coming from Barbara. She asked, for example, Susan, that's for you, if you can say a couple of words about the circular economy indicators you mentioned in your presentation.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief because I know we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah, please.
The example that I showed in Amstel, I think we had jobs growth, value added, material, and carbon. I think what's important to say here is that we do tailor these indicators depending on the context and the field that we're working with. So, for example, on Circle House, they're slightly different again because of some other factors there. The key thing, I mean, some of these are easier than others, you know, and what we try and do is to ensure that we don't only use the easily measurable indicators, but we do look at, they're more difficult because they're part of a system, and where do you draw the boundary of the system and so forth. You know, value added is very broad, but for us, what's important in these fairly early stages of the circular economy, where we're all still learning and building these ways of working with it, is that we take multiple indicators, and that we don't just go for the ones that are simplest and most secure, and that we do consider that. So 2 points. One is that they can change, and secondly, that they we don't just go for the easy, obvious route.
Mm-hmm. And there's another question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Klaus,
no, it's
quickly comment.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. Go ahead. Otherwise, you've got a long list of questions to go through. That's fine.
Yeah, I would like to get the audience a little bit inside also.
Exactly.
There are many questions also, and I take just one of them about materials and the disassembly. We can wonderfully design buildings, but the problem of demounting building elements and materials after the life cycle to be recycled, to make it possible to recycle or reuse materials, that's not really solved. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your experience?
Me again, or?
Well, yeah, both of you.
Okay. I'll again be fast. So it's all about the interfaces, these intersections between all the different elements and materials are where it's at. That's what makes or breaks it. And of course, there are some general principles about keeping these mechanical, keeping them reversible, and so on. But I think I noticed in the question someone asking, for example, with the biological materials. So there, yes, it's totally clear. It would be pointless to make that material and then use something which is either going to create a Frankenstein object or that's going to be harmful in some way. So with, for example, in that project, we used cornstarch as a way of binding, and it degrades with the application of a certain temperature, a high temperature, but not otherwise. So yes, it's those interfaces we can. Lime mortar again with bricks instead of, and so on. That's maybe a more familiar example. So yeah, we look at it as a system rather than a single material.
And there's another question very closely connected to it. If we should not reduce more the use of concrete because of the problem with sand and the high embodied energy. And the question is this concrete a green type with substituted aggregates and binders? So the problem, more or less, to make it more general, of composite materials.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it would be madness for me to say anything, but yes, we must reduce the concrete. What we're looking at often are hybrid structures. So, for example, we have projects I didn't talk about that are timber construction, but quite often, whether it's due to fire or structure or whatever that might be, it is, you know, most of it is timber, but then maybe there's some steel work or some concrete, you know, so you get these hybrid systems, you get the best of both worlds. Also can help with things like acoustics and thermal mass and so on. So I would say, yes, absolutely, we reduce is the idea there, but I don't want to entirely demonize it, because it can play a role actually in enabling other materials that are very beneficial to come in. I'm not quite sure about the aggregates, what project that was, but I will say in part of our Circle House partnership, Nordics, a company here in Copenhagen, and there, as part of that project that we're doing, are developing, looking at construction waste and turning that into the aggregate and concrete and so forth. But it's a pretty new developing area, so yeah.
Heidi, I just want to add something on this point, because I think one needs to also differentiate when we talk about this cyclical world, what's happening in Europe and elsewhere. Okay, let me tell you what is the most which are the most open-minded and natural circular economy drivers, called poverty. If you look in Africa and India, what these people do with waste material, we in Europe wouldn't even think of. It goes all the way from materials for buildings to art. If you look in Europe, which is the most recycled product, is when you rebuild war damage from the same material that lays on the floor. The point I'm trying to make with these statements is that in the end, you know, it is a factor again of, is not just us designers, is industry playing part of it. Having designed and worked in India, I can tell you, you try and push steel or timber, you will struggle, because the clients will say the Indian construction industry likes to do concrete, QZO, right? So then if you start saying, oh, let's import the timber because we don't want to do too much deforestation, you have 100% surcharge. So the whole import duty. So why not reduce the tax on renewable products? Why not do some of that incentivization? There is a rooted problem from government all the way down to industry. Designers can come up with ideas, yeah, like what Susan is saying, but you have to face the real world out there. How is that rolled out? Yeah, how does that work? You do a project in West Africa on steel, it has to be shipped in from Europe. It will take 6 months. So one needs to rethink. One needs to rethink in terms of these materials and reuse. I'm all in support of it. There isn't a one-glove-fits-all solution to different parts of the world. And we have big problems outside Europe, far bigger than in Europe. And the thing is, these people are actually more willing and able, with very little, to empower them in doing that. I'm not a big believer of selling to these different parts of the world the latest, most sophisticated material. I'm there to show you've got materials. For example, we tried to do things in terracotta in India, and then they're saying, well, people don't really know, there is no factory. And we then do our own research to prove the client is wrong, because he has no interest. There's also a stigma associated with these things that are terracotta or timber. That looks like low quality, poor material. You have it the same in Brazil, in South America. So there's a whole process of education, top-down change, and bottom-up action. Yeah, and sorry to sound so strong about it, but none of that replaces looking for new materials. But my goodness, do we have a lot of material which we can reuse. And the other problem with reuse is you have people saying, I'm not going to warrant. The insurance company says, I'm not going to underwrite that because it's who knows what weakness that has structurally or whatever. Yeah. There's a plethora of problems. But at the end, it's easy to talk about why not to do it, as opposed to, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just do it.
The problem is...
mindset.
Sorry, Klaus, but the problem is, I think, that we cannot solve the problems here, which are on a political basis and so on. We try to bring always also politicians inside and investors inside and so on, so that we really have a bigger view of the stakeholders and the opinions and the problems which are related to that, but also the opportunity. So the the problem you mentioned of bringing renewable materials to India or to other countries or back from there into Europe, it doesn't make really sense if we have to carry building material around the world. So the intelligent part of it is again a human issue, which is, let's try to do the best out of what we have in the region available. But taking that point,
and we got to work from bottom up, Heidi. There's a lot of people, and by me saying this is not saying, I'm saying the opposite of waiting for governments to do. How do you change governments? Is by people action. How do we change this problem? By people action. Not waiting for governments to do things. Show them, show the politicians. He will take your idea as his and then become big. Show him.
We all have to do have to try to push it. I would like to come back to the topic of reduction. On the one hand, reduction of emissions, reduction of material consumption, and so on. But on the other hand, the idea of widening structures to be more adaptable. What you mentioned, Klaus. Can you make a short statement, both of you, please, on this issue? And then I again go to the chat.
Well, I think it's about looking, expanding our notion of sustainability, both in terms of time and in terms of people. Because if we are examining that amount of material and just looking at the construction phase, then we're never getting a big picture. I mean, I'm just telling you, life cycle analysis, really. So if you need to look over a much longer period of time in order to really have a sense of the true value of that. And also what it can do, what is the effect of this space? What is it going to engender? What else does it support? Whether that's socially, in terms of community, in terms of health, so it's leanness is incredibly important, but it cannot be the only indicator, and certainly not over just a construction cost.
Yeah, I think in terms of my biggest challenge is always keeping it short, so I'll do my best now. So in terms of reduction, all I would say at the end of the day, it comes in two parts. Number one, the human side of things, accepting this is good enough. I don't need all the bits all the time, whenever I want, at my fingertips. So understanding that. And the second thing is creating spaces that are adaptable. In doing so, you don't need additional resource or material. Yeah, your solution will last you longer. Yeah. You're shocked. I finished.
I'm surprised. I'm not shocked.
There you go.
I'm surprised. Great job, Klaus. I would like to just point out one comment, which I think counts for a couple of recent developments around the world. From Leonardo Agurto to Klaus. Greetings to London and to your non-critical perspective about the speculative model of development. Gentrification, exclusion and austerity, social exclusion are lack of sustainability as well. New Green Deal is exclusion for poor people. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I like first to understand the question, because there seem to be multiple questions in that. I'm sorry, I'm maybe not the best person to take this all these wonderful words into in my simplified brain what it's all trying to get. But at the end of the day is where I'm coming from. If he's saying is the new Green Deal is exclusion of the poor people, then somebody hasn't understood my lecture. I lived 15 years in Africa. I've lived in I've seen poverty. I've seen what things change. And what we are doing is we're focusing a lot on what Europe or the America or the developing world is doing. I've been 30 years working with clients of different sorts, from governments to individuals. And the most successful projects, and I'm sure every architect or engineer or person in this PLEA conference knows, is when you have synergy and common mindset, from client to designers to the design team, all acting as one, like in a rowing boat. We're all rowing the same way. So coming back is about poor people. The whole focus is about investing more into the developing world to actually leapfrog. Don't make these people the same mistake we did in Europe and where we're sticking in. You know, there are opportunities in these countries, and I don't want to go into the politics of things, but there are opportunities in some of these countries to actually do a lot quicker and a lot better than we can. I know, I leave the name blind, a Danish famous architectural practice. They said to me once, we export ideas to China. China makes it happen, not Denmark. So why? Well, is it dictatorship that's doing it, or what is it? So let's not go there politically, but all I'm saying is there is way to deliver fast change if there's willingness to do so. And therefore the focus is actually on helping the most needy. And the poor, like I said earlier, are not staying poor, they're becoming wealthier. And you got to understand the DNA, the demographic change, both monetary and age-wise, in the years and decades to come, to understand the problem we're facing. It isn't about rich and poor anymore. It isn't about developing and developing. It's understanding where you should make the change that has the most impact. So I'm not sure whether that answers the question, unless you can tell me what else I should address.
It comments the question, which was not a question but a comment, which is fine.
Oh,
and
okay.
Klaus, I just take that comment of yours now, because you said, or you made the question in your lecture, which I found very, very important. Why not invest more to the developing countries straight away to go into zero carbon cities or
Yes.
developments? And I think this
Yes.
is one key sentence or key question you made.
Yes, and I can give you a live example, all right? And that, to sustain that, we did a project, we've done more than one, we did a project in Ghana, in Accra, in the capital. And they wanted all this air conditioning and this, that, the other. And then amongst the different things, we said to the client, how often do you have power failures in this country? Oh, in the city, oh, at least 3 times a week. So what's happening here is, we have an unstable infrastructure. In some parts, there isn't one. So why not go straight for a renewable? It becomes more cost effective than bringing a power line of hundreds of kilometers away, however the power is generated, to the site. You start becoming autonomous. And in Europe, you have it on your doorstep and you're debating whether that's cheaper or not. There you don't have it. So straight away, leapfrog it. You create a green infrastructure and therefore a green economy for these people in the most cost-effective manner as well. And that's the amazing bit about it. So, and that argument sells, because money sells and you can sell it on money, even though the reality is you want zero carbon developments.
Thanks, Klaus. And also you said facts instead of interpretation, which I can just underline. And I would like to switch to Susan again, because Susan also made a very interesting statement I found. Susan, you said, GXN looks much more complicated than other planning standards or planning lines, planning processes. How do you then succeed to convince the clients to still go with your office?
I think if I understand you correctly, it was a bit where I spoke about the difference between 3XN and GXN, in that it can look, you know, the variety of work we do, the different sorts of outputs. So because it's not always a building, sometimes it is, but for GXN, you know, it can be a book, it can be a bit of code, it can be, you know, all different kinds of things. I think the key thing there is that we sort of take experiment and scale, so that we repeat this sort of iterative process of learning, and then seeing how we can, you know, transfer that, apply it in different ways. But I've forgotten now precisely what you asked me about. What did you say?
How do you succeed? How do you convince clients to go with you, although your process looks more complicated?
Well, I don't always tell the client. No, I mean, we do have an interesting, if you're asking really about business model, you know, we're certainly very diversified. And in terms of convincing the client, well, a lot of that does come from, I mentioned, for example, post-occupancy evaluations, to be able to point to facts and figures and say, here is this direct correlation, actually, whether it's our own research or from other fields that I spoke about. I think it's incredibly important to show that correlation and in fact consequence that it does have. I think that's got a big impact on clients, and to talk about that operational aspect. So even if your building costs are this, but we know that in terms of operation, in terms of salaries, in terms of effect on learning, and so on, that this has larger consequences. So we really look at that impact analysis, basically, is what I'm saying. But it's not always easy. It's a good question.
Thanks, Susan. Before we close that roundtable here, I would take two small questions which came into the chat. One is, Klaus, about your opinion on future housing standards in UK. Fionn is asking. Quickly, please, short.
Two answers to that. Obviously, there is a drive to improve the housing standards substantially through future homes. Equally, as they know, there is going to be a change in housing construction where planning almost doesn't be needed. It's a bit worrying. That will slow down the process. So there is, to a certain point, where you can improve the housing stock. Clearly, there's existing housing as well, and refurbishing, which is another complicated issue. There's no time for that at the moment to discuss. But in parallel, I think what is happening is, as I said in my seminar, that alone is insufficient. So there's no need to convert UK's housing to passive house. I don't believe in that. That's not at all necessary. But I think what's going to happen is the greening of the decarbonisation of the infrastructure is what is the parallel stream to help. What I hope will not happen is that designers become lazy and then start saying, well, I just wait for the decarbonisation of the grid and therefore I keep on designing the way I want to design. I'm seeing some signs of that. So that can't happen. It needs to work from both ways, infrastructure and design.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question.
Was it too short? Sorry, I'm trying to keep it short.
Only 6 minutes left. And last question to Susan, please. Do you think the material passport is a good instrument for circularity? There was just a big project in Europe about the building the material passport.
Material passport, absolutely. It's sort of one of our 3 cornerstones of Circular Futures. One of the books that I spoke briefly about. What it can do, it allows you to know what is in this material, what sort of life it's lived, what kind of binding agents or other aspects of it, so you know its sort of pedigree. So just like we want to know more and more about our food and the importance of labeling of that and understanding it, it's the same idea, and it's a fantastic idea. The other part of it is the ability, therefore, to have a kind of a material Google, if you like, whereby you have this catalogue. So whereas before kind of salvage is something that's been very ad hoc and very analog and low tech, the ability to build a database where people can choose from these elements and understand where they're from is extremely important and revolutionary. Really, it's a key to being able to urban mine upcycle as well. You know, it's these two things going together where design for disassembly meets upcycling. However, and we have, by the way, like on Circle House, it has material passports, but it's an immature technology at the moment because it requires significant hardware and software at a systemic level. You know, it needs a kind of critical mass in order to be able to really have that big impact that it can, and I really believe will have. So yes, it's a really important tool.
Thanks, Susan. And now it's up to me to round up a little bit the discussion. There were many comments. You have made very, very interesting and very good points, I think. My personal summary out of this, I'll call it journey through scales and topics, would be it's all about people. Why? Because on one hand, we are people in the world, in the neighborhoods, in the buildings. And on the other hand, only people can be intelligent and can interact and can create the new creativity which we actually need urgently to tackle all the tasks we have now and which we have to solve more or less now and not tomorrow. So let me tell you, Susan and Klaus, thank you very, very much for your really wonderful lectures and also your input here. Also to the audience, thank you very much for your questions and comments in the chat. So really take the opportunity also in the networking rooms to really talk to people. Don't hesitate to go and contact whoever you think it's worth to talk about topics. That's why we are actually here at PLEA. And I'll leave you to the coffee break now, and please enjoy the rest of the conference, or most of the conference still, and profit as much as you can from all the networking and the interesting topics. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Heidi. I'd like to thank you and Jorge for organizing this event in difficult circumstances. It is not easy, I know, and he's done a tremendous job. To you all at PLEA, keep on pushing the message, and congratulations to you all. And thank you, Susan.
Seconded.
Yeah, thank you, Jorge, because Jorge was with his big teams and supporters organizing all that within 2 months in the digital way. And Jorge, really, thank you very much. It works wonderfully, really, really well. So have a good coffee break. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.